We can start.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So we'll start with chapter 12 today, which is surprise. So let's see what is a surprise here. History is the study of change, ironically used as a map of the future. Stanford professor Scott Sagan once said something everyone who follows the economy or investment markets should hang on their wall. Things that have ever happened before happen all the time. History is mostly the study of surprising events, but it is often used by investors and economists as an unsaliable guide to the future. Do you see the irony? Do you see the problem? It is smart to have a deep appreciation for economics and investing history. History helps us calibrate our expectation, study where people tend to go wrong, and offers a rough guide of what tends to work. But it is not in any way a map of the future. A trap many investors fall into is what I call historians as prophets fallacy, an over reliance on past data as a signal to future conditions in a field where innovation and change are the lifeblood of progress. You can't blame investors for doing this. If you view investing as a hard science, history should be a perfect guide to the future. Geologists can look at a billion years of historical data and form models of how the earth behaves. So can meteorologists and doctors. Kidneys operate the same way in 2020 as they did in 1020. But investing is not a hard science. It's a massive group of people making imperfect decisions with limited information about things that will have a massive impact on their well being, which can make even smart people nervous, greedy, and paranoid. Richard Feynman, the great physicist, once said, "Imagine how much harder physics would be if electrons had feelings." Well, investors have feeling, quite a few of them. That's why it's hard to predict what they will do next based solely on what they did in the past. The cornerstone of economics is that things change over time because the invisible hand hates anything staying too good or too bad indefinitely. Investor Bill Bonner once described how Mr. Market works. He's got a capitalism at work, t-shirt on, and a sledgehammer in his hand. Few things stay the same for very long, which means we can't treat historians as prophets. The most important driver of anything tied to money is the stories people tell themselves and the preferences they have for goods and services. Those things don't tend to sit still. They change with culture and generation. They are always changing and always will. The mental trick we play on ourselves here is an over admiration of people who have been there, done that when it comes to money. Experiencing specific events does not necessarily qualify you to know what will happen next. In fact, it rarely does, because experience leads to overconfidence more than forecasting ability. Investor Michael Batnick once explained this well. Confronted with the argument that few investors are prepared for rising interest rates because they have never experienced them. The last big period of rising interest occurred almost 40 years ago. He argued that it didn't matter because experiencing or even studying what happened in the past might not serve as any guide to what will happen when rates rise in the future. So what? Will the current rate hike look like the last one or the one before that? Will different asset classes behave similarly, the same, or the exact opposite? On the one hand, people that have been investing through the events of 1987, 2000, and 2008 have experienced a lot of different markets. On the other hand, isn't it possible that this experience can lead to overconfidence, failing to admit you are wrong, anchoring to previous outcomes? Two dangerous things happen when you rely too heavily on investment history. as a guide to what's going to happen next. First, you will likely miss the outlier events that move the needle the most. The most important events in historical data are the big outliers, the record breaking events. They are what moved the needle in the economy and the stock market. The Great Depression, World War II, the dot-com bubble, September 11th, the housing crash of the mid 2000s. A handful of outlier events play an enormous role because they influence so many unrelated events in their wake. 15 billion people were born in the 19th and 20th centuries. But try to imagine how different the global economy and the whole world would be today if just 7 of them never existed. Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, Gavrilo Princip, Thomas Edison, Bill Gates, Martin Luther King. I'm not even sure that's the most meaningful list, but almost everything about the world today, from borders to technology to social norms, would be different if these 7 people hadn't left their mark. Another way to put that is that 0.004% of people were responsible for perhaps the majority of the world's direction over the last century. The same goes for projects, innovations, and events. Imagine the last century without the Great Depression, World War II, the Manhattan Project, vaccines, antibiotics, ARPANET, September 11th, the fall of the Soviet Union. How many projects and events occurred in the 20th century? Billions, trillions, who knows? But those 8 alone impacted the world orders upon orders of magnitude more than others. The thing that makes tail events easy to underappreciate is how easy it is to underestimate how things compound. How, for example, 9/11 prompted the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates, which helped drive the housing bubble, which led to the financial crisis, which led to a poor job markets, which led tens of millions to seek a college education, which led to $1.6 trillion in student loans with a 10.8% default rate. It's not intuitive to link 19 hijackers to the current weight of student loans. But that's what happens in a world driven by a few outlier tail events. The majority of what's happening at any given moment in the global economy can be tied back to a handful of past events that were nearly impossible to predict. The most common plot of economic history is the role of surprises. The reason surprises occurs is not because our models are wrong or our intelligence is low. It's because the odds that Adolf Hitler's parents argued on the evening 9 months before he was born were the same as them conceiving a child. Technology is hard to predict because Bill Gates may have died from polio if Jonas Salk got cranky and gave up on his quest to find a vaccine. The reason we couldn't predict the student loan growth is because an airport security guard may have confiscated a hijacker's knife on 9/11. That's all there is to it. The problem is that we often use events like the Great Depression and World War II to guide our views of things like worst case scenarios when thinking about future investment returns. But those record setting events had no precedent when they occurred. So the forecaster who assumes the worst and best events of the past will match the worst and best events of the future and is not following history. They have accidentally. Anyone wants to say something, or please mute yourself. Okay. So the forecaster who assumes the worst and best events of the past will match the worst and best events of the future is not following history. They are accidentally assuming that the history of unprecedented events doesn't apply to the future. Nassim Taleb writes in his book, Fooled by Randomness. In pharaonic Egypt, scribes tracked the high water mark of the Nile and used it as an estimate for a future worst case scenario. The same can be seen in the Fukushima nuclear reactor, which experienced a catastrophic failure in 2011 when a tsunami struck. It had been built to withstand the worst past historical earthquake, with the builders not imagining much worse and not thinking that the worst past events had to be a surprise, as it had no precedent. This is not a failure of analysis, it's a failure of imagination. Realizing the future might not look anything like the past is a special kind of skill that is not generally looked highly upon by the financial forecasting community. At a 2017 dinner I attended in New York, Daniel Kahneman was asked how investors should respond when our forecasts are wrong. He said, whenever we are surprised by something, even if we admit that we made a mistake, we say, oh, I'll never make the mistake again. But in fact, what you should learn when you make a mistake, because you did not anticipate something, is that the world is difficult to anticipate. That's the correct lesson to learn from surprises, that the world is surprising. The correct lesson to learn from surprises is that the world is surprising, not that we should use past surprises as a guide to future boundaries, that we should use past surprises as an admission that we have no idea what might happen next. The most important economic events of the future, things that will move the needle the most, are the things that history gives us little to no guide about. They will be unprecedented events. Their unprecedented nature means we won't be prepared for them, which is part of what makes them so impactful. This is true for both scary events like recessions and wars and great events like innovation. I'm confident in that prediction because surprises moving the needle the most is the one forecast that's been accurate at virtually every point in history. I'll read it again. I'm confident in that prediction because surprises moving the needle the most is the one forecast that's been accurate at virtually every point in history. Second, history can be a misleading guide to the future of the economy and stock market because it doesn't account for structural changes that are relevant to today's world. Consider a few big ones. The 40K is 42-year-old. The Roth IRA is younger, created in the 1990s. So, personal financial advice and analysis about how Americans save for retirement today is not directly comparable to what made sense just a generation ago. We have new options, things changed. Or take venture capital. It barely existed 25 years ago. There are single venture capital funds today that are larger than the entire industry was a generation ago. In his memoir, Nike founder Phil Knight wrote about his early days in business. There was no such thing as venture capital. An aspiring young entrepreneur had a very few places to turn, and those places were all guarded by risk averse gatekeepers with zero imagination. In other words, bankers. What this means, in effect, is that all historical data going back just a few decades about how startups are financed is out of date. What we know about investment cycles and startup failure rates is not a deep base of history to learn from, because the way companies are funded today is such a new historical paradigm. Or take public markets. The S&P 500 did not include financial stocks until 1976. Today, financials make up 16% of the index. Technology stocks were virtually non-existent 50 years ago. Today, they are more than fifth of the index. Accounting rules have changed over time, so have disclosures, auditing, and the amount of market liquidity. Things changed. The time between US recessions has changed dramatically over the last 150 years. So, US economy in recession is this chart. So major between, I think, 1876 and between somewhere 1920s or 30s. The average time between recessions have grown from about 2 years in the late 1800s to 5 years in the early 20th century to 8 years over the last half century. As I write this, it looks like we are going into recession 12 years since the last recession began in December 2007. That's the longest gap between recessions since before the Civil War. There are plenty of theories on which recessions have been less frequent. One is the Fed is better at managing the business cycle or at least extending it. Another is that heavy industry is more prone to boom and bust overproduction than the service industries that dominated the last 50 years. The pessimistic view is that we now have fewer recessions, but when they occur, they are more powerful than before. For our argument, it doesn't particularly matter what caused the change. What matters is that things clearly changed. To show how these historic changes could affect investing decisions, consider the work of a man many believe to be one of the greatest investment minds of all time, Benjamin Graham. Anybody would like to take up reading from here?
Can I read?
Yeah, please.
From where do I start?
Graham's classic book.
Okay. Graham's classic book, The Intelligent Investor, is more than theory. It gives practical directions like formulas investors can use to make smart investing decisions. I read Graham's book, when I was a teenager, learning about investing for the first time. The formulas presented in the book were appealing to me because they were literally step by step instruction on how to get rich. Just follow the instruction. It seemed so easy. But something becomes clear when you try applying some of the formulas. Few of them actually work. Graham advocated purchasing stocks trading for less than their net worth assets. Basically, cash in bank minus all debts. This sounds great, but few stocks actually trade that cheaply anymore, other than, say, penny stock accused of accounting fraud. One of the Graham's criteria instructs conservative investors to avoid stock trading for more than 1.5 times book value. If you followed this rule over the last decade, you would have owned almost nothing but insurance and bank stocks. There is no world where that is okay. The Intelligent Investors is one of the greatest investing books of all time. But I don't know a single investor who has done well implementing Graham's published formulas. The book is full of wisdom, perhaps more than any other investment book ever published. But as a how-to guide is a questionable at best. What happened was Graham a showman who sounded good but whose advice didn't work? Not at all. He was a widely successful investor himself, but he was practical and he was a true contrarian. He wasn't so wedded to investing ideas that he stick with them when too many other investors caught into onto the theories, making them so popular as to render that potential useless. Jason Zweig, who annotated a later version of Graham's book, once wrote, Graham was constantly experimenting and retesting his assumptions and seeking out what works. Not what worked yesterday, but what works today. In each revised edition of The Intelligent Investor, Graham discarded the formulas he presented in the previous edition and replaced them with the new ones, declaring in a sense that those do not work anymore or they do not work as well as they used to. These are formulas that seem to work better now. One of the common criticisms made of Graham is that all the formula in the 1972 edition are antiquated. The only proper response to this criticism is to say, of course they are. They are the ones he used to replace the formulas in 1965 edition, which replaced the formula in the 1954 edition, which in turn replaced the ones from the 1949 edition, which were used to augment the original formulas that he presented in the security analysis in 1934. Graham died in 1976. If the formulas he advocated were discarded and updated 5 times between 1934 and 1972, how relevant do you think they are in 2020 or will be in 2050? Just before he died, Graham was asked whether detailed analysis of individual stock, a tactic he used became famous for, remained a strategy he favored? He answered, in general, no. I am no longer an advocate of elaborate techniques of security analysis in order to find superior value opportunities. This was rewarding activity, says 40 years old, when our textbooks was first published. But the situation has changed a great deal since then. What changed was competition grew as opportunities because competition grew as opportunities become well known. Technology made information more accessible, and industry changed as the economy shifted from industrial to technology sectors, which have different business cycle and capital uses. Things changed. An interesting quirk of investing history, is that further back you look, the more likely you are examining a world that no longer applies to today. Many investors and economists take comfort in knowing that forecasts are backed by the decades, even centuries of data. But since economy evolve, recent history is often the best of the guide to the future because it's more likely to include important conditions that are relevant to the future. There's common phrase in investing, usually used mockingly, that it's different this time. If you need to reboot someone's who's predicting the future, won't perfectly mirror the past. Say, oh, so you think it's different this time, and drop the mic. It comes from investor John Templeton's view that the four most dangerous words in investing are it's different this time. Wow. Templeton, though admitted this, it as a different at least 20% of time. The world changes. Of course it does. And those changes are what matters most over time. Michael Batnick put it, the 12 most dangerous words in investing are, the four most dangerous words in investing are, it's different this time. That doesn't mean we should ignore history when thinking about the money, but there's an important nuance. The further back in history you look, the more general your takeaway should be. General things like people's relationship to greed and fear, how they behave under stress, and how they respond to incentive tends to be stable this in time. The history of money is usual for the kind of stuff, but specific trends, specific trades, specific sectors, specific casual relationships about markets and what people should do with their money are an example of evolution in progress. Historians are not prophets. The question then is, how should we think about and plan for the future? Let's take a look in the next chapter. Yes, anybody can take over.
Shall I? Anyone wants to read? Padma? Yeah, that's okay. You can continue.
No, no, please go on. Please go on.
Absolutely
I thought
no
you already
issues.
know the-
I'll read after you. Absolutely no issues.
Okay. Chapter 13, Room for Error. The most important part of every plan is planning on your plan, not going according to plan. Some of the best examples of smart financial behavior can be found in an unlikely place, Las Vegas casinos. Not among all players, of course, but a tiny group of blackjack players who practice card counting can teach ordinary people something extraordinarily important about managing money: the importance of room of error. The fundamentals of blackjack card counting are simple. No one can know with certainty what card the dealer will draw next. But by tracking what cards have already been dealt, you can calculate what cards remain in the deck. Okay. Doing so can tell you the odds of a particular card being drawn by the dealer. As a player, you bet more when the odds of getting a card you want are in your favor and less when they are against you. The mechanics of how this is done don't matter here. What matters is that a blackjack card counter knows they are playing a game of odds, not certainties. In any particular hand, they think they have a good chance of being right. You know there's a decent chance they're wrong. It might sound strange given their profession, but their strategy relies entirely on humility. Humility that they don't know and cannot know exactly what's going to happen next. So play their hand accordingly. The card counting system works because it tilts the odds ever so slightly from the house to the player. But bet too heavily even when the odds seem in your favor, and if you're wrong, you might lose so much that you don't have enough money to keep playing. There is never a moment when you're so right that you can bet every chip in front of you. The world isn't that kind to anyone, not consistently anyways. You have to give yourself room for error. You have to plan on your plan, not going according to plan. I'll read this line again. You have to plan on your plan, not going according to plan. Kevin Lewis, a successful card counter portrayed in the book Bringing Down the House, wrote more about this philosophy. Although card counting is statistically proven to work, it does not guarantee you will win every hand, let alone every trip you make to the casino. We must make sure that we have enough money to withstand any swings of bad luck. Let's assume you have roughly a 2% edge over the casino. That still means the casino will win 49% of the time. Therefore, you need to have enough money to withstand any variant swings against you. A rule of thumb is that you should have at least 100 basic units. Assuming you start with $10,000, you should comfortably play a $100 unit. History is littered with good ideas taken too far, which are indistinguishable from bad ideas. The wisdom is having room for error is acknowledging and that uncertainty, randomness and chance unknowns are an ever present part of life. The only way to deal with them is by increasing the gap between what you think will happen and what can happen while still leaving you capable of fighting another day. Benjamin Graham is known for his concept of margin of safety. He wrote about it extensively and in mathematical detail. But my favorite summary of the theory came when he mentioned in an interview that the purpose of the margin of safety is to render the forecast unnecessary. It's hard to overstate how much power lies in that simple statement. Margin of safety, you can also call it room for error or redundancy, is the only effective way to safely navigate a world that is governed by odds, not certainties. And almost everything related to money exists in that kind of world. Forecasting with precision is hard. This is obvious to the card counter because no one could possibly know where a particular card lies in a shuffle deck. It's less obvious to someone asking, what will the average annual return of the stock market to be over the next 10 years, or on what date will I be able to retire? But they are fundamentally the same. The best we can do is think about odds. Graham's margin of safety is a simple suggestion that we don't need to view the world in front of us as black or white, predictable or crapshoot. The gray area, pursuing things where a range of potential outcomes are acceptable, is a smart way to proceed. But people underestimate the need for room for error in almost everything they do that involves money. Stock analysts give their clients price targets, not price ranges. Economic forecasters predict things with precise figures, rarely broad probabilities. The pundit who speaks in unshakable certainties will gain a larger following than the one who says, we can't know for sure, and speaks in probabilities. We do this in all kinds of financial endeavors, especially those related to our own decisions. Harvard psychologist Max Bazerman once showed that when analyzing other people's home renovation plans, most people estimate the project will run between 25% and 50% over budget. But when it comes to their own projects, people estimate that renovations will be completed on time and at budget. Oh, the eventual disappointment. Okay, Padma, you want to take from here?
Yes, Mansi, I can.
Yeah, go on. Go on.
Two things causes two things causes to avoid room for error. One is the idea that somebody must know what the future holds, driven by the uncomfortable feelings that comes from admitting the opposite. The second is the second is that you are therefore doing yourself harm by not taking actions that fully exploit an accurate view of that future coming true. But room for error is underappreciated and misunderstood. It is often viewed as a conservative hedge used by those who don't want to take much risk or aren't confident in their views. But when used appropriately, it is quite the opposite. Room for error lets you endure a range of potential outcomes, and endurance let you stick around long enough to let the odds of benefiting from a low probability outcome fall in your favor. The biggest gain occur infrequently, either because they don't happen often or because they take time to compound. So, the person with enough room for error in part of their strategy, which is cash, to let them endure hardship in another stocks, has an edge over the person who gets wiped out, game over, insert more tokens when they are wrong. Bill Gates understood this well. When Microsoft was a young company, he said he came up with this incredibly conservative approach that I wanted to have enough money in the bank to pay a year's worth of payroll, even if we didn't get any payments coming in. So Warren Buffett expressed a similar idea when he told Berkshire Hathaway shareholders in 2008, I have pledged to you, the rating agencies and myself, to always run Berkshire with more than ample cash. When forced to choose, I will not trade even a night's sleep for the chance of extra profits. There are a few specific places for investors to think about room for error. One is volatility. Can you survive your assets declining by 30%? On a spreadsheet, maybe yes. In terms of actually paying your bills and staying cash flow positive, but what about mentally? It is easy to underestimate what a 30% decline does to your psyche. Your confidence may become shot at the very moment opportunity is at its highest. You or your spouse may decide it is time for a new plan or a new career. I know several investors who quit after losses because they were exhausted, physically exhausted. Spreadsheets are good at telling you when the numbers do or don't add up. When the numbers do or don't add up. They are not good at modeling how you will feel when you tuck your kids in at night, wondering if the investment decisions you have made were a mistake that will hurt their future. Having a gap between what you can technically endure versus what is emotionally possible is an overlooked version of room for error. Another is saving for retirement. We can look at history and see, for example, that the US stock market has returned an annual average of 6.8% after inflation since the 1870s. It is a reasonable first approximation to use that as an estimate of what to expect on your own diversified portfolio when saving for retirement. You can use those return assumptions to back into the amount of money you will need to save each month to achieve your target nest egg. But if but what if future returns are lower? Or what if long term history is a good estimate of the long term future? But your target retirement date ends up falling in the middle of a brutal bear market like 2009. What if a future bear market scares you out of stocks, and you end up missing a future bull market? So the returns you actually earn are less than the market average. What if you need to cash out your retirement account in your 30s to pay for a medical mishap? The answer to those what ifs is you won't be able to retire like you once predicted, which can be a disaster. The solution is simple: use room for error when estimating your future returns. This is more art than science. For my own investment, which I will deserve more in chapter 20, I'm sorry, which I will describe more in chapter 20, I assume the future returns I will earn in my lifetime will be one third lower than the historic average. So I save more than I would if I assumed the future will resemble the past. It is my margin of safety. The future may be worse than one third lower than the past, but no margin of safety offers a 100% guarantee. A one third buffer is enough to allow me to sleep well at night. And if the future does resemble the past, I will be pleasantly surprised. The best way to achieve felicity is to aim low, says Charlie Munger. Wonderful. An important cousin of room for error is what I call optimism bias in risk taking, or Russian roulette should statistically work syndrome, an attachment to favorable odds when the downside is unacceptable in any circumstances. Nassim Taleb says you can be risk loving and yet completely averse to ruin, and indeed you should. The idea is that you have to take risk to get ahead, but no risk that can wipe you out is ever worth taking. The odds are in your favor when playing Russian roulette, but the downside is not worth the potential upside. There is no margin of safety that can compensate for the risk. Same with money. The odds of many lucrative things are in your favor. Real estate prices go up most years, and during most years, you will get a paycheck every other week. But if something has 95% odds of being right, the 5% odds of being wrong means you will almost certainly experience the downside at some point in your life. And if the cost of the downside is ruin, the upside the other 95% of the time likely isn't worth the risk, no matter how appealing it looks. Leverage is the devil here. Leverage. Taking on debt to make your money go further pushes routine risk into something capable of producing ruin. The danger is that rational optimism, most of the time, masks the odds of ruin some of the time. The result is we systematically underestimate risk. Housing prices fell 30% last decade. A few companies defaulted on their debt. That is capitalism. It happens. But those with high leverage had a double wipeout. Not only were they not only were they left broke, but being wiped out erased every opportunity to get back in the game at the very moment opportunity was ripe. A homeowner wiped out in 2009 had no chance of taking advantage of cheap mortgage rates in 2010. Lehman Brothers had no chance of investing in cheap debt in 2009. They were done. To get around this, I think of my own money as barbelled. I take risk with one portion and I'm terrified with the other. This is not inconsistent, but the psychology of money would lead you to believe that it is, I just want to ensure I can remain standing long enough for my risk to pay off. You have to survive to succeed. To repeat a point we have made a few times in this book, the ability to do what you want, when you want, for as long as you want, has an infinite ROI. Room for error does more than just widen the target around what you think might happen. It also helps protect you from things you would never imagine, which can be the most troublesome events we face. The Battle of Stalingrad during World War II was the largest battle in history. With it came equally staggering stories of how people dealt with risk. One came in late 1942 when a German tank unit sat in reserve on grasslands outside the city. When tanks were desperately needed on the front lines, something happened that surprised everyone. Almost none of them worked. Out of 104 tanks in the unit, fewer than 20 were operable. Engineers quickly found the issue. Historian William Craig writes, during the weeks of inactivity behind the front lines, field mice had nested inside the vehicles and eaten away the insulation covering the electrical system. The Germans had the most sophisticated equipment in the world, yet there they were, defeated by mice. There they were, defeated by mice. You can imagine their disbelief. This almost certainly never crossed their minds. What kind of tank designer thinks about mouse protection? Not a reasonable one, and not one who studied tank history. But these kinds of things happen all the time. You can plan for every risk except the things that are too crazy to cross your mind. And those crazy things can do the most harm because they happen more often than you think, and you have no plan for how to deal with them. In 2006, Warren Buffett announced a search for his eventual replacement. He said he needed someone genetically programmed to recognize and avoid serious risk, including those never before encountered. I have seen this skill at work with startups my firm, Collaborative Fund, has backed. Ask a founder to list the biggest risk they face, and the usual suspects are mentioned. But beyond the predictable struggles of running a startup, here are the few issues we have dealt with among our portfolio companies. Should I finish this, Money?
Yeah, it is only one more page, 126. You can just continue till then.
Yeah. Water pipes broke, flooding and ruining a company's office. A company's office was broken into 3 times. A company was kicked out of its manufacturing plant. A store was shut down after a customer called the health department because she didn't like that another customer brought a dog inside. A CEO's email was spoofed in the middle of a fundraise that required all of his attention. A founder had a mental breakdown. Several of these events were existential to the company's future, but none were foreseeable because none had previously happened to the CEOs dealing with these problems, or anyone else knew, anyone else they knew for that matter. It was uncharted territory. Avoiding these kinds of unknown risk is almost by definition impossible. You can't prepare for what you can't envision. If there is one way to guard against if there is one way to guard against their damage, it is avoiding single points of failure. A good rule of thumb for a lot of things in life is that everything that can break will eventually break. So if many things rely on one thing working and that thing breaks, you are counting the days to a catastrophe. That is a single point of failure. Some people are remarkably good at avoiding single points of failure. Most critical systems on airplanes have backups, and the backups often have backups. Modern jets have 4 redundant electrical systems. You can fly with one engine and technically land with none, as every jet must be capable of stopping on a runway with its brakes alone without thrust reverse from its engine. Suspension bridges can similarly lose many of their cables without falling. The biggest single point of failure with money is a sole reliance on a payback to fund short-term spending needs with with no savings to create a gap between what you think. I think, what do you say? I'll continue.
Yeah, that's the last page.
Okay, with no savings to create a gap between what you think your expenses are and what they might be in the future. The trick that often goes overlooked, even by the wealthiest, is what we saw in chapter 10, realizing that you don't need a specific reason to save. It is fine to save for a car or a home or for retirement, but it is equally important to save for things you can't possibly predict or even comprehend, the financial equivalent of field mice. Predicting what you will use your savings for assumes you live in a world where you know exactly what your future expenses will be, which no one does. I save a lot and I have no idea what I will use the savings for in the future. Few financial plans that only prepare for known risk have enough margin of safety to survive the real world. In fact, the most important part of every plan is planning on your plan not going according to plan. Now, let me show how this applies to you.
So we'll stop for the day and reflect on what we have read so far. So you will change is basically the next step of the in the flow of things that we have. So how we actually handle that by making the changes. So yeah, so just to reflect on chapter 12 and chapter 13 that we read. One is for surprise and one was room for error. Yeah. Any takeaways? Any examples that stood out? Any reflection?
Can I go?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so my major takeaways would be I know more, the chapters that we read is more on the technical part of money, more on stocks and more on the trading part. But I think majority of which I can, add it to the other factors as well is the mention of, the margin for safety, the terms like the room for error, gray area is something that I think I can cultivate the same kind of psychology in the other factors of life as well. So yeah, obviously, money matters when it comes to that. We basically put most of the things, and we tend to keep our emotions attached to the monies that we are creating, like whether it's a payment or whether it's something that we are most anticipated stocks or something that we are, in general we are putting those money into the factors. But I think this is also, very relevant to the other factors of life when we are planning on something, whether it's a smallest thing like event planning or a trip planning. We'll always think to the extent that it's always going to be perfect for us. But according to this, I have understood that, even there, there is a room for error. Even there is a gray area. We don't know what exactly is going to come, and we cannot commit to a foreseen result of what we created in mind. So that's the best takeaway for me. And what surprised me is that since I have worked on the stocks a little bit before, there is always a, there are like lakhs of rupees that you fund for courses to just to learn how the patterns are, how the history were, how well the previous stocks worked out. But this book has clearly explained that it has like almost 50 to lesser 50 of chances that it can be come into the future. That has actually surprised me to some extent. So that would be my key takeaway for this.
Yeah, Pravina. So yeah, that takeaway was also very important for me, and it was put so very upfront with all these examples that one had to be convinced or get convinced by whatever they have stated in the book. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Anybody else? Okay, so for me, the chapter 12, which was surprise. So it brought out clearly the way we look at future is based on our past. We rarely are able to calibrate our thought process to what is happening now and to what is right to be done now. So I think that is the gap that it showed, how we look at just the past and project the future. But we have to also understand what is currently this scenario may not be there in the future. So there has to be a further added layer of understanding that one has to have. Second, I would say the chapter surprise is actually making us think that and understand that things keep changing. There is no comparison of the past, current, and the future, but we always, as humans, want to notice patterns, and that's how we work, and that gives us comfort and a sense of control. We do get into this kind of understanding, and thereby maybe sometimes we get distorted and really get surprised. But when the surprise actually hits, it hits very hard. To come out of that surprise, stabilize, and then move on, I think we take time because of the psychological effect that we have, that we anticipate something believing it is written on stone and it will not change, or that's what it will be. But when actually things happen, it is beyond our control that we don't actually consider. So it is not only control that we don't have on things beyond us, but also with the best effort and with the sincere intentions, sometimes the best course of action also might not turn out well. So we don't have the control on our outcomes as well. So I think that is the underlying point that that the chapter 12 was for me. And if I link it to the book Same as Ever, written by the same author, it basically stresses on one thing. What is constant here is change is constant. However, one has to also acknowledge that human reactions, such as fear, greed, surprise, stay the same, right? The surprise is not events themselves, but our failure to accept and expect the unpredictability that is there. So that is where I think we have to understand what we can learn from history is this understanding, right? Now coming to chapter 13. Now chapter 13, yes, the mouse example was the most striking. Yes, when we build a tank, we don't think about mouse, and there is nowhere. So even if we do things for the intended use, but there can be certain other things which also make So there are lot of things, I would say, beyond our control, and there is definitely room for error always. So what do we do then? Then we prepare ourselves first by acknowledging that you will be surprised. Second, we can draw the best safety net that we can have, both in life and as well as in investing, because uncertainty is permanent. Certainty is not permanent, but uncertainty is permanent. While doing that, we will have to acknowledge there will be certain risks. We can be prepared, but we will not be totally prepared for the future, is one understanding I have got now. And yes, room of error can be used, but more from a understanding that at least I made an effort. That is what I feel. Now, if I compare or if I have to see a parallel thing in the book, same as ever by this author, I think it's more, the world always feels more riskier than we actually, it is. And we always ignore the safety buffers, right? And we keep on chasing more and more. But we'll have to understand the concept of enough as well here, and also decide when we draw a line, and how do we actually create a safety mechanism for us, so that the minimum that we want to save or the minimum that has to be taken care is taken care of. So yes, room of error is has to be very, very understood in a manner that we don't get overconfident as well, because not even a good thing that is happening well for us right now is going to continue to happen well. So that kind of a fragility it brought to my understanding of how I should look at the present and the future. But at the same time, it also answers that there is a safety mechanism which we can build into our systems, way of thinking, and in life, so that at least we have those comfortable way of handling it. And I think the next chapter you will change will actually build on this and understand it further more, that how we can do it better maybe. Yeah. So yes, anybody else would like to share their perspective?
Yeah, very, very, very well, beautifully explained, Manisalvi, and summarized. So for me, very, very small points. I personally could connect the reading as it started today with the morning reading, where in that also the author was talking about our effect, like our the past that has an effect on us, and he was talking about the cause and effect of past and present and future and things like that, but that was more on a personal front. But today the chapter started with the same note, where he it talked about the past influencers, or Hitler. He mentioned these people and how their existence had dramatically changed the course of so many things. And that reminded me of the butterfly effect. There is this thing, something called butterfly effect in the Amazon, like where a flip of the wings of a butterfly can cause a storm or something, some theory like that. So that reminded me of that. And also, other than that, I loved, like as you shared very beautifully, I feel when it comes to money, like we are normally very optimistic people, but when it comes to money, we have to be a little more like on a safety side. Especially, like, as I loved how they have mentioned, like Warren Buffett example, where he says, like, I would not trade profit, like just for a little bit of profit, I would not trade my night's sleep. So I feel maybe taking calculated risk and things like that. And one another story that says, this too shall pass. There is this story, right, by one of the there is I won't tell the story now for the time's sake, but I'll just share that there, where this king was given this note by his minister or a priest, that and he was supposed to open that only in cases of extreme. And the note read, like when he went through extreme downfall, or even at the time of victory. So it read like, this too shall pass. So nothing is permanent was the message of the story. So keeping that in mind, and even the casino example, where they shared about how they anticipated the other way around, that room for error example. So all these were like eye-opening takeaways for me today. And yeah, we do need to think in these directions. And as they say, like always have a contingency plan. And I feel the author somewhere is emphasizing a lot on the importance of saving, and showing us a very practical approach, and also showing how we are more emotionally driven people, taking psychology based decisions when it comes to money, rather than what shows on the paper or statistics, or how much ever learned or aware we are about all these concepts. So ultimately the decisions are taken from the psychological perspective, so he's making us more aware on that grounds. And I'm really liking that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mansi, for your points. Anybody else would like to share? Okay, then maybe we can call it a day and then join tomorrow for reading from chapter 14 onwards. Yeah. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone. Thanks, Mani.
I'm done taking the notes. You want me to keep the room open for a while? You're taking some notes or something?
Just give me a 1 minute.
Yeah, not an issue at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you compiling it in a document or something, like by any chance? Like,
No, actually, I started, but I have not completed. But I will try to make a summary chapter wise as to what is the,
yeah. So
priorities.
when we used to do that reading in the morning,
Hmm.
and especially when Richa took the notes, she did that. She had created a PowerPoint format
Okay.
template kind of a thing, and she used to take notes like every day in this format, like which I also do now, but I just do it as a WhatsApp message. She used to put it in a PowerPoint slide, and she
Okay.
used to do that, the reading and discussion, both as two different parts every day.
Hmm.
And then she compiled it as a summary and shared it at the end. So that was a very nice thing.
Hmm.
Somehow I still need to figure this out, like how I can do it, but
Okay.
I just put it in the group and leave it there. But just asking, like, since you are more into taking notes and like doing things
Yeah,
in a
actually, this
structured
book
way.
I have not been able to do that, but maybe I'll just look back and check, whether I can compile it from whatever is pasted in the group. Yeah.
Yeah, not a compulsion. I was just
No, no, no.
curious.
Yeah, it is better actually because there are points which come up, right?
Yeah, actually, I like, yeah, what happened now recently, I lost all my WhatsApp data. So my daughter just deleted WhatsApp from my phone, and I had to reinstall it.
Okay.
So and as I did, I lost all the earlier messages from every personal message, DM, everywhere, like WhatsApp and everything, groups and all. So now I feel, oh my God, I lost everything. I cannot
Hmm.
go back and check them. So then
Okay,
I
okay.
have realized the importance of it. I'm like,
Right.
oh shit, we should
Hmm.
actually keep things a little in a different space, at least what are important. like super important. They cannot be staying in WhatsApp alone. So that's what my learning was. So that's what got me curious, like what should I do next? So yeah, no problem. Yeah. So
Okay,
thank you.
so
So
yeah,
when
so
there are 20 chapters, na, Maniselvi, approximately, I guess.
yeah.
So we are expecting to finish this book this week. Like, what
No,
do you
no,
think?
not this week. Mostly it will go, I think, Monday. Monday it will require time because I thought we will finish almost 15 today, but it will take.
The chapter was long today. No,
Yeah.
what I was asking, because there will be this Ganesh Chaturthi coming on
We'll finish
next
mostly
week.
before
So
that
I was
because
just
it's
curious
Wednesday.
if we will be finishing it. Even for the morning book, I'm curious. Like, I hope it finishes before that. Otherwise, there will be a break in between. Like, that is what, if we can avoid it at any, like, if possible. Otherwise, we have to go with it. But then just curious.
Yeah, actually, we will be mostly completing by Monday or Tuesday maximum. So,
So I think it will be done. Like, yeah, because I think it is on Wednesday, I think, the
yeah,
Ganesh
it's on
Chaturthi.
Wednesday. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
if we
okay.
keep
No
up
problem.
this same speed of reading, then maybe we'll finish it by that time, or it might go to Tuesday if something's. So, I'm
Yeah,
just
but Monday
thinking,
and Tuesday, both days are still okay, like I feel.
yeah,
Are
and
you,
then
do you have any plans to do something, like has Pravina shared other day, like where we can have a compilation or like a insight sharing session on book or something like that? Like she just mentioned something na, yesterday.
yeah, I spoke to her today. I said, since you were the only one who asked, there is no, not much attendance I expect if a group is done, a group kind of a discussion and stuff. What do you think?
Uh-huh.
So I said, if you
So,
want, I can personally, we can have a chat and we can close it
mm-hmm. No,
because
we can.
not,
I would be interested too. Like, in fact, I was thinking of doing this. Like let's have this monthly meetup or somewhere where we just come together and discuss books that we are reading, insights upon them, or something like that. So maybe that way also we can do, or we can do it after one book is over. Let's do
okay,
it.
then,
Also,
then,
I wanted to check with you separately, but since it's just two of us now, I'll ask you right away that about the 12-year week book, are we having a VAM? Like, I'm
actually, the
actually
thing
curious.
was last Saturday, I didn't keep it because it was a continuous 3 days holidays. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, people didn't turn up the earlier VAM, so I just didn't want to pressure. But
Oh,
I
you
think I
had,
can.
acha. I think I missed that day. I was actually
Yeah.
somewhere else.
So yeah, it's okay. Means that day I actually came on the people opted also, but didn't connect. So I was surprised, but then it's okay. Next Saturday was it so happened it was 3 days holiday. So I thought many people will have anyways plans to go out or something. So anyway, it was a festive thing. I said okay. Now this Saturday again I will raise a poll and ask if people are interested. Then Saturday will 3 o'clock.
So you are planning it on Saturdays, right?
Yeah,
Like,
Saturdays only. Saturdays.
okay. And what time? So I will also
Two
keep
to three.
myself
Two, three. Two to
two to
three.
three, the same reading
Yeah,
time
yeah,
that we
same
have.
reading time.
Okay, okay. So I will be there. Like if it is happening, or I think let's meet once, na, to
Yeah,
just
yeah,
check our progress this Saturday
yeah,
at least.
yeah,
So yeah, I will be there. If like now that I know, I'll keep myself free on that
yeah.
time and day.
Right. We'll have it. Then.
And do
Uh,
announce it in the group right away so that people can plan accordingly if
Right,
whoever is interested. And they
right.
also get to some work like in the next 2 days if they want to,
Yeah,
so that they have to share, because sometimes it happens, right? Like many a times, like we are not so much in touch with it, but when there's a reminder, we get alarmed, like, oh yes, I have to do this kind of a thing.
right. And second thing is, do you have any book ideas for 2 to 3 days? Because I think this will get over by 27th, say. So 20th and 29th will again, there will be nothing. So you have thought of how to fill those 2 days.
Actually, no, I don't nowadays, na, I don't keep it so restricted to every day. Sometimes I just take a break and gap at times, and what I'm expecting is that the 2 3 days we will be having to take a break for the Ganesh Chaturthi also. At least two
Okay.
days. Like I personally won't be available for the first 2 days.
Then
Then I
it's
will
fine.
be available. Otherwise, we'll take a break. Otherwise, we can take up a very, very small book. like how we did the boy mole kind of a book. So we can take a small 2 to 3 day book. So I'm actually looking forward to have some really small, nice reads. We read some of them like last year and in between, but I'm actually looking forward because I found that these small books are very powerful. They're very interesting. We finish it in a day or two, and they have great impacts. So if you also can find something like that, so there is this one book which Deepa had shared with me. I had put it in the poll for the morning. Horton Hears a Who. Are
Hmm.
you aware of it? Elephants.
No,
It's
no.
more like a story book, kids story book, but she said it has profound messages. So maybe
So
a book like that, which is just 75 pages with lot of illustrations and all, we can take up a book like that just for fun also. Or if you can look for something, you can suggest. You will be
actually,
not available.
I could not get anything much, but there is one book suggestion that had come, which is only 56 pages. So I'll
Oh
just share
wow,
it
what
with
is
you. You just have a look. It is not a regular book
yeah.
or a book which it needs focused reading. So it
Okay,
will take time for the message to sink to understand, and the English is the old English. So just check
okay.
whether you feel that.
There is this one book I was just checking for a smaller book even for this week, na, because I wanted to have something really small so that it doesn't go on beyond the Ganpati dates and we don't have to take a break in between of a book. So there is this 2 3 books I saw. One is the Anthem. Have you ever read it by any chance? Anthem by Annie Rand.
No.
uh, I don't know how that book is, but 2 3 people have suggested that book. Like there is this one book called The Fountainhead by Annie Rand, which is a favorite of many people. I have heard like it's a novel, but it's a very good book and it's a very big book. So many of them they suggested read Anthem first. So if you like that, maybe you can read Fountainhead, something like that. I don't know if it's a novel, but that is a small book. I'll do one thing. I'll share that PDF with you. So I just saw it's not a big book. It's small, like no, lesser pages. And even the books that I have taken in the poll na for the earlier for the morning read, all
Hmm.
those are like kind of 150 or less than 150 page books. So they will be finished in like a week's time max. I'm expecting like so that way. So we can
Okay.
consider one of them also, like few like Do the Work is one book like that, or
Hmm.
War of Art, or things, or some books like that we can consider if we want to. You
Hmm.
will be not available since like the 1st of September or a little
Yeah,
later from that?
first of September onwards.
Okay, okay. So that doesn't leave us a lot of room to take
Right.
up
Right.
anything for that. Yeah. Okay, okay. No problem. Let's see how it goes. We'll go with the flow.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you, dear.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Bye
Yeah.
bye.
Take care. Yeah.